All right, everyone. Super excited to be welcoming Ankita today. Ankita is founder of Khalo, Ayurvedic wellness food company. I hope I got that right.
Yeah.
Also excited that she's actually the first female founder I'm interviewing on the pod, as well as actually a first sort of pre-seed founder on the pod, because typically I tend to do seed and later stages. So yeah, super excited to hear about her journey, her upbringing, and all of that. So Ankita, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me on here. I'm so excited to chat and, share my story. A little bit about me. Should I start from the beginning or?
Yeah, absolutely. Wherever you want to start. Absolutely.
Okay. So I'll start from the beginning because, my story is a little, very personal to me in terms of why I started Khalo. So I actually grew up across Bombay, San Francisco, London, New Jersey, and then New York, which is where I live now. So I've been traveling a lot. My dad is an entrepreneur, so he was the first person for my family to actually leave back in India and move to America. So there was a lot of change and, you know, lots of change happening as I was growing up, moving schools, having to make new friends, new cultures, new academic backgrounds. It was, definitely a very different type of childhood, but I think it's definitely shaped me to who I am. And the reason why I've been able to take such big risks, or why I've been like, I guess, more like leaning towards taking risks. So I was also the first person from my family to go to college in America. So I started off studying engineering, as like any good South Asian child does, business, doctor, lawyer, engineer. I decided to pick engineering and I hated it. So that's definitely not something that I love doing. But after I went to college here, I was just realizing that, wow, people can actually do things that they're passionate about and things that they care about. And so I was like, I want to do that too. And I loved beauty and fashion and all things creative. And I loved storytelling. So I switched into the business school and convinced my parents that this was the right thing for me. And eventually I would be able to make it. So just trusting me. And I did it. I have had a career in beauty for the past 7 or 8 years, working at big beauty brands like Lancome, Dior, running their makeup marketing team. So from all things from, product development to 360 marketing to growth marketing to running campaigns and, all the things you can think of under a marketing umbrella. Did that for a couple of years, realized that the big corporate beauty companies, as amazing as they are, they weren't feeling as fulfilling to me. I wanted to make a larger impact in the world. And I felt like the only way for me to do that was to be able to be a part of something that I had like more weight in, like something that I could actually contribute to more. So I quit my job, which was obviously very scary for my family, but I didn't tell them for that reason. I told them later once I figured out what I was doing. Um, and I joined the founding team of Avrani. And so basically, I was with Avrani for 2 years, was part of their founding team. It was their second hire. And Avrani is a skincare brand that's inspired by all of these ancient Indian beauty rituals. And we're modernizing that for the US customer. And so, within 2 years, I, helped them 5x their revenue. We just closed a Series A of 7 million. So super, super excited and proud of all of the work that we've done. And that was sort of the last piece of confidence that I needed to just like go for it and do it myself. And, Kala was brewing in my mind for the past 5 years. So I decided to go for it. So I've been working on a bootstrap for the past year and we're planning on launching later this year.
Super awesome. So yeah, I've heard a lot of first, right? Your first one in the family, obviously immigrant background, moved around a lot. So obviously a lot of probably adjustment and just a different environment and all of that. And I think I always say immigrants are like the ultimate entrepreneurs. Like basically uproot yourself, go to a different country. I mean, I myself and my parents, the same thing. So I really appreciate that sharing that. Um, so you talked a little bit about this. Why you decided to pursue entrepreneurship. Part of it, maybe like, tell us a little bit more about that. Was that your upbringing, aside from just like leaving your mark in the world. I think you mentioned that as well. But what else kind of um, drove you to pursue entrepreneurship?
Yeah, that is a great question, and I think part of it is how I grew up, seeing my dad being such a big risk taker and leaving our family, like his whole entire family, my mom and my dad leaving their families to come here. We don't have like any extended family in America, so it's really just us. So I think just, having that risk-taking mindset to be able to pursue something of greater value was like something that was always ingrained in me. So my dad obviously starting his own consulting business in tech when I was starting. And my mom, who, her main role while we were growing up was just raising us. So, she was really focusing on that. But, getting to see my mom evolve as an entrepreneur. So she was at home obviously and, didn't like love that my dad was like the only breadwinner in the house and she wanted to do something that was her own. So I saw her on this journey and she's my constant inspiration and what inspired Khalo, but she started a catering business from her house. And like she started noticing that a lot of families were like super busy. Both the parents were working and she was home and she was making us all these amazing meals. So her friends were like, hey, can you help make us some meals? Like we'll start paying you. So she started catering to like families around us and like they would just come over and pick up food. And it was like our friends and our network. And she started building this really amazing word of mouth business. And, from then to now she's a chef at restaurants and like running their kitchen. So, it's been really amazing to see both of my parents and their journeys and sort of the risks that they've taken just to pursue things that they love and, for the greater good of the family or the world or whatever it may be. And so I think that was instilled in me as a mindset from a very young age. But being an entrepreneur, I didn't think I was always going to be an entrepreneur. I think it was definitely something that came to me while I was in college when, I was actually part of the business school and took an entrepreneurship class. And one of my professors, who I've been friends with for over 10 years now, has been following along my journey, but he really inspired me and pushed me to do things that I was passionate about. And I think that's when I really realized, okay, like I think I would love to have my own business. I don't know exactly what it will be. At that time, it was like beauty and tech. I wanted to use like AI to do like beauty recommendations. And, so there was a lot of thoughts in my head, but, nothing really came to fruition because I'd never had experience working at a startup before or just even seeing what that world looked like. So I think it was really a journey. And after working in corporate beauty, just recognizing that, hey, actually, the person who I am is more suited to run a company than be an employee. And I think you start realizing that in very subtle ways. Like I just realized there's a lot of red tape at corporate companies and a lot of the ideas I have, I wasn't able to implement because it was too large or, would get feedback like, oh, that's a really great idea. You should start a company to do that. So there's a lot of stuff I was hearing. And then, it takes a long time to decide. I mean, it took a long time for me to get on that journey. It's like, okay, like I'm going to do this. So I think my journey was really just following my gut and my path and just knowing that I wanted to get experience in the world, in the corporate world, especially before I started my own thing. So my journey looks a little different,
Yeah.
but I think it's inspired by by how I grew up and also just my personal experience in the workforce.
No, thank you for sharing that. And actually, that's not very uncommon, right? You go work in corporate and then you look at the bureaucracy and decide that's not for you, right? Then pursue a
Yeah.
different track. So, obviously, female South Asian founder, right? Pursuing entrepreneurship is probably not the norm. I guess, how did you reconcile or deal with that? Tell us about, was that a hindrance or is that it actually even helped you? Like, how did you deal with that from your own community and your family? Was there support for that? Was there resistance to that?
I think it was a mix, but I will say it was hard. I wouldn't say it was easy, like it was a walk in the park. It was definitely like I had to believe in it so much that I had to make it my truth that this was going to succeed or that this is what I wanted to do and this would bring me joy. So I really think that, if I'm sharing a little bit of my experience, it's more kind of that internal conversation you have in your head. Like you are your own limiting belief. So I think, yes, the community is always going to say something, whether it's your family or your friends or even someone who you don't know, that they're always going to have an opinion. So I think it's just realizing like the opinion that matters the most is the one in your head. And, there's a lot of doubts that you have because of what you're hearing. But if you can clear all of that and really just ground yourself in what is your North Star, what is your purpose, you will be able to move forward and like accomplish what you want. And yes, it'll be hard because everybody might be doubting you, but as long as you're believing in yourself that this will succeed, it will succeed. So I think it was really a transformation in my own mindset that helped me get over the non-believers or get over the doubt from my community or even my parents, which is probably the opinion that matters the most to people is like, what are my parents going to say? What are they going to think? And, for a very long time, my dad was like, what are you doing? Like, and like, he just really wanted me to succeed, right? He worked so hard to get here, not for me to just like do whatever with my life. Like, he wanted me to do something meaningful where I could support myself. And so, it was really like convincing him that this is what I'm going to do that's going to make me happy. Because if I become a doctor, I'm not going to be happy. Do you want me to be depressed for the rest of my life? And it was really just, having that conversation with them and being honest. I know a lot of my friends who still pursued careers that they're not happy with and they still complain about it. And that breaks my heart because I wish they had the courage to have that conversation with their family or their community saying, this is what brings me joy. And I know I will be successful because when you do something that you love, the universe conspires to make it, bring it to life.
Oh, I like that. I think you touched upon one aspect of it is that there's always this guilt, right? That your parents worked so hard, you came here, took basically a huge gamble. There's a lot of guilt associated with pursuing entrepreneurship, but I'm seeing more and more folks are pursuing it, and actually parents are encouraging it. Maybe not in the beginning, but I guess you eventually beat them to submission. uh, because if you are like very passionate about it, I think they get it and they want you.
They will see it and they will see how happy you are and see how hard you're working. And they're like, you know what? At the end of the day, they'll start realizing as long as my child is happy, I know that they'll be successful and happy with whatever happens. So, it takes some time to get to that point. But if you can push hard enough just to get to that point, it'll be worth it.
100%. So tell us about Khalo a little bit more. You talked about you started the journey about a year ago. Where are you at? And I think one particular area, as you're going through your journey, would be really helpful, right? Like from when you had the idea, you probably had the idea a while ago. Like, what are the steps you're taking, kind of like pre-launch the product and everything, just for like other people that might be maybe thinking about going through the same journey. I think it'll be
Yeah,
good
for
for them.
sure. So I had the idea for Khalo now. Now I think it's 6 years ago. So it's been a long time. But I'll tell you a little bit briefly about how Khalo came to life, and it really is through my own personal journey. So I was telling you, I grew up with my mom feeding us amazing, delicious, healthy food, and it was all based in Indian cuisine. So that's what we grew up moving around, growing up. And when I moved out to college, that's really the first time where you're kind of on your own. Like I lived in dorm life and, I started eating like shit. And I was like eating frozen dinners and takeout, whatever I could get my hands on because we're really busy. And I hear a lot of my friends resonate with the story because that's what happened to them. But what happens when you eat like that and you deprioritize what you're putting in your body is that you develop all of these health issues. So I was going through so many health issues, like I was going through IBS and leaky gut and acne and depression and all of these health issues that are related to your gut. And I didn't realize that. I got so caught up in the standard American diet that I couldn't possibly fathom that it was my food that was causing this. It was like, something else. And then, so I realized that it was my gut health. I started learning about the gut microbiome, and it's a very trendy word now, but it's been around for a long time. So then I basically went on this whole journey to holistically heal myself. And because I didn't want to feel tired all the time. I was in like my early 20s. And I'm like, I shouldn't be feeling tired all the time or like having all these gut health issues. Like I want to be healthy. I want to feel lively and I want to feel energetic. And so I went on this like holistic health journey and I started, leaning on my mom more because she used to cook a lot. And I just had this kind of idea like, okay, maybe if I cook more, I could put better things in my body because what the health food industry is selling us is kind of failing us. It's just over processed foods that is actually making our gut health issues and our bodies worse. So I was like, okay, I want to start to cook more. And so I would spend like hours and hours with my mom on FaceTime. I probably spent hundreds of hours with her on FaceTime at this point, where she was teaching me how to cook. And she was teaching me about like Indian cuisine and how it was actually based in functional wisdom of this concept. And it's called Ayurveda. And it's a science from back in India that comes from the same place as yoga and meditation. And that, talks about food as medicine. It talks about gut health as like the crux and the center of like good health. And so I was like, oh, wow, this is super amazing. So I'm like, all right, let me try this. And then so I was cooking all these amazing meals, and like I was spending 3 or 4 hours a day cooking these meals, which is not reasonable for anyone to spend time. But throughout that process, I completely healed myself of my gut health issues, my mental health issues, my skin. I mean, just everything. Like my life was just better. I just felt healthy and I felt amazing. And I just realized that this magical thing that I had just discovered was too powerful for me to keep to myself. So I was like starting to share it with my friends, and like it was just such a daunting thing for people to think about making like Indian food at home, or like using all these spices that can't even have access to in grocery stores. So that sort of gave me this idea, and I was thinking about this for a while. I'm like, I want to create a company with a mission to transform people's relationship with food and give them like access to this Ayurvedic wisdom and Indian flavors through something. I didn't know exactly what it looked like, but I knew that this was my mission. So I was testing out a bunch of different ideas, and I was working at companies, so I was sort of doing it in my free time. So for people who are thinking about like an idea, don't feel like you need to rush into it. Like it took me a long time to get to the point where I quit my job and am now working on this full time. And like, so don't just quit your job and just do it. Like really think about it and really kind of understand the market. Like for me, I started going to like all the grocery stores and I started asking people, I'm like, hey, because I started off with like sort of ready to eat concept, kind of like a daily harvest for healthy Indian food. And so I was like, going to like Trader Joe's and Whole Foods and like just like asking the people who are stocking the shelves, hey, what's the most popular food that people buy? And like they take me to like this Indian food section, and they didn't know I was Indian because at this time I was wearing masks. So I was like, oh wow. And then I was like, okay, maybe it's just this one store. So then I go to like a lot of different stores and I keep getting the same feedback that people, when they actually look for ready to eat meals, are going towards the meals that are the most flavorful. So I was starting to do a lot of market research and testing this out, and building out the idea. And then once I had my experience with Irani, where I had actually scaled a startup very successfully, I was like, okay, I'm ready to do this. Now I've seen what it takes from the inception of like when you have a product to what it takes to scale it to a point where you are actually making revenue. Like that is really powerful. And that was like the inflection point where I was like, okay, I'm ready to do this. Okay, I know I went on a tangent, but that was really like
Yeah, that was great. That was great. But the second part of the question was like, what are some of the things you're doing? You've been pre-launch. I think you mentioned that market research, just going to a different grocery store,
yeah.
really just getting as much feedback as possible. Anything else? Anything else to keep?
Yeah. So I've been working on a bootstrap for a year now and we haven't launched. And that was very intentional because I didn't just want to come up with a product and start launching it. I actually spent the first 6 months just like kind of like ideating and creating and getting inspiration. But the most important thing that I did that I want to share this advice is I was just interviewing founders, whether they were founders like 2 or 3 years ahead of me or they're very, very successful founders, and basically learning from them. I was kind of doing what you're doing now, but I was just doing this on regular calls, and I have notes from hundreds of founders that I had interviewed, just learning from all their mistakes. I've worked in beauty for a very long time, so there's some transferable skills into the food space, but food is completely different than beauty. So I knew that I needed to like understand what a co-packer was, like how do you work with suppliers, like, what is like a minimum MOQ, like all these different things like that you don't really know about, like that you need to understand. So I was basically going through like a mini boot camp that I set up for myself by just kind of interviewing founders. And then once I kind of had like an idea solidified, I learned all the mistakes that founders had made that they wish they had changed, I basically was like, okay, now I need to do some customer research on this and really figure out like, is there a market out there? How can I prove some sort of traction or product market fit without even getting a product out there? Because I learned, one of the biggest learnings was from the founders, when you start making a product, your time gets sucked into making products. So how can you test your idea without even creating a product, which I think is very powerful. So what we use is this concept called signal testing. So we were putting out like ads with messaging and beautiful imagery and like, testing out value propositions for different customer demographics and like what product format. Is it a ready to eat, or is it a chai, or is it a drink, or like is it a functional cooking base? And so we were testing out all these different ideas without even having me making something in my kitchen. And so I think that was really powerful because I could make bold pivots, without having invested in a lot of real product at that point. So that's another lesson that I think I can share. And then I started building a team. I started finding the people through all these founders who have already vetted people who they've worked with and just asking them, hey, do you have a recommendation for this or that? And, I basically was like building this team of people that I could kind of activate, whenever I needed them or whenever I have capital. So, really focusing on that. And so that's basically what we've done over the past year. We just kicked off our fundraise this past month, so like a few weeks ago. And it's been going really amazing because we spent a lot of time just solidifying the concept, the direction, the team, the product market fit, like the traction. Obviously, we haven't launched, so we don't have like real product market fit yet, but at least proving that there's a demand for this.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of work that went in before. And so now what this looks like going forward, we're planning on officially launching in September, but we're working on like beta testing. So we basically are working on our samples. We're going to start beta testing now, like over the next couple months to really refine the product, because what I have right now is going to look completely different from the product that we're going to sell because we're going to get a lot of feedback. So that's really the next steps, figuring out our go-to-market strategy, the partnerships we want to have and who we want to bring on the team. So there's a lot more work that we have to do, but, it's really important to share that having a really good foundation and like taking your time with it, like you create your own timeline. So don't rush yourself in doing something. The more time you spend on doing this, the more confident you will be when you go out there, especially to fundraise or pitch, because you'll know all the answers to questions people are going to ask you. And I actually feel like that was like a really big piece, is like, don't just start doing something without actually knowing like the answers to like the details of things. So yeah.
Oh, that's great. I think a lot of the things you mentioned about market research, just doing, I guess some example ad campaign to see what's your target audience. I mean, you have a marketing background, so obviously it's a little bit of cheat code there, but all of those things are like super smart. What about the supplier side? Have you talked to manufacturer suppliers as well? Like, yeah.
Yeah. So another thing I did like over the past year, and this is specifically to food, but I'm sure like any industry that someone's in, there's conferences and there's huge meetups around the world. And so I went to every single one by myself, which is a little scary going to, a big conference and walking like the halls. But I met so many incredible people. This is actually where I met a lot of those founders, because I actually got to meet them face to face. And I think now that we've sort of moved away from a little bit of what happened during COVID, where there wasn't a lot of in-person stuff, there is a lot more in-person stuff. So I encourage more of us to go out there. So I was going through these conferences, and I actually met a lot of our suppliers who we're working with now. So we're working with some regenerative farms back in India. And so that's where we're sourcing our ingredients from. But I wouldn't have found them just sitting here behind my desk. Like, I had to get out there and meet everybody. I went to probably 6 or 7 different conferences and like really put in a lot of work before I went to the conference, and all of the follow-ups that I had posted. So like treat it like a thing. Like it's like a big deal to go to a conference. Like, don't just go walk the halls, like prepare, like know who's coming there, know who you want to meet, and just leave room for flexibility. And then just make sure you follow up and like reach out to every single one of those, because you'd be surprised how many people like meet everybody, but like nobody does follow-ups. So if you can do that, then you'll stand out and you'll have a call with like the CEO of a really big company that you admire and they'll take your call. So that I think it, it goes a long way.
Some so I think you touched on this already, like launch in September. What else can you share as far as what's next for Khalo? And then you mentioned fundraising as well. How do people get in touch with you in case they want to invest, to be a potential supporter?
Yeah, for sure. Well, I just realized we didn't even talk about exactly what the product is. So going back quickly to the concept of Ayurveda, and it talks about food being medicine for our bodies. And if you go down to the core of what that means, they talk about gut health being like kind of the cure to all like disease and like any discomfort that we have in our body. So I'm like, okay, how do we give access to people to the science of Ayurveda, which is so vast? And so we basically did a lot of customer research and we came to this product format. And so we're creating a masala cooking base that is functional. So it's based in this Ayurvedic wisdom. Now, what makes it Ayurvedic? So when you use spices and herbs, so I'm sure a lot of you have tried Indian food before, the spices and herbs in that food are not only just for flavor, but they are actually meant to help digest the food that they're cooked with. And people don't know this. So like coriander and cumin and fennel. And so like, this is not a common, like these aren't common spices that everybody uses in their pantry. But actually, when you include these, they actually help digest the food and like ignite this digestive fire, which is basically your gut microbiome, and help digest and break down the food and help it become energy and like assimilate it into your body. That is the core, like simplest thing of how we need to use food as fuel. When our gut is like kind of out of balance, the food is basically just going through our body. Like nothing is being processed, nothing is being assimilated. You're not really getting the nutrients and kind of energy out of that food. So what we're doing is we're creating these amazing bases that have like Indian flavors and all of this like, culture and cuisine within. But the thing that differentiates us, and we're the first to actually do this, is to create like functional benefits. So like including this Ayurvedic spice blend that no matter what you cook it with, whether you're creating an Indian dish or whatever dish you want to make, whether you're making a pasta or a pizza or scrambled eggs, it's going to help you digest that food better so that you actually have a more diverse gut microbiome, and it could help your skin, it could boost your immunity, it would help your mental health. So there's so many more functional benefits than, just having food as like your nutrients. So that's really what we're creating in terms of our product. And this is just first of an entire vision of products that we have that we're going to create. But the biggest piece of advice for like anybody thinking about a product or, launching a CPG brand is keep it simple. What is the simplest thing that you can launch that people can incorporate into their lives? And then you can build on top of that. So that's really what we've built with our product. And then in terms of how people can get involved and hear about, sort of where we're going with this, you could follow me on Instagram at Ankita Sankla, or go on to coloworld.com and sign up to be on our wait list when we start beta sampling. But you can also get our monthly updates. You can actually be part of our startup journey, where I'm going to be sharing what it takes to actually start a company. So especially if you are an entrepreneur, you can see what those updates look like and what that progress on a month-by-month basis looks like from this point where I am now to launch. So hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thanks for sharing that. So this has been great. Thank you for sharing your journey. Khalo World, super excited to actually try the product when it comes out. I asked this question to all entrepreneurs, anyone that comes on the pod. Like, what advice would you have for other people watching, that may potentially want to go through their own entrepreneurial journey?
So I have 3 pieces of advice, and I've thought about this a lot because I've been sharing my wisdom with like other friends who are thinking about starting companies. And the biggest one is like, listen to that voice in your head and trust your gut. Like, you are going to start going out there with this idea and sharing it with like a million people, and they're all going to have different opinions. Take all of them with a grain of salt, but then at the end of the day, really listen to what that voice is. What is your North Star? What would make you the most excited and the most passionate about doing this for the next 10 years? Because let's be honest, that is what it's going to take. Whether it's 5 years or 10 years, you're going to be working on it for a while. So like really, really thinking about that and make sure that you're following your gut, and trust it because it really does have good wisdom. The second piece of advice is like keep it simple. Whatever like idea you have, I think even I fell into this trap is like going into creating something really complicated and convoluted and just you're just really getting into your head. So just keep it simple. What is like your kind of like MVP, your minimum viable product that you can just start doing signal testing with. So, just go out and do that and just put out ads. You just have to put a little bit of money behind it, but I think it's a lot less money than you actually like going out and building it first. So that would be my second thing. And part of keeping it simple, don't like overthink things so much and just go for it. Like just go with that first thought that comes into your head and just try it and see how it goes. And then the last thing is ask like other founders who are 2 or 3 years ahead of you, maybe in that same industry or a different industry, on their advice and their journey. It goes such a long way. And because they've been in your shoes, they have a lot better like advice for you. And they're actually willing to be vulnerable to share that with you. And I think that's more powerful than like, yes, I think getting an MBA is amazing and going to school and learning all this stuff. But like people learn more doing it than by just learning it in school. So I think you can actually learn a lot by just like asking people for advice. And like, yeah, just like don't be afraid to reach out to people who you don't know or just reaching out to them on LinkedIn or going to these conferences and asking them for their email or phone number. Like they will give it to you. You just have to know to ask.
Yeah, those are wonderful, wonderful advice. Thank you so much for my Ankita for obviously coming on the pod. I'm super excited about your launch and potentially be a supporter. I'll talk to you soon.
Thank you. Yep. Take care.
All right. Take care.
Asta, we're industry here for Asta. We're industry to work Asta, the industry food to Asta. We're